Meghan Markle was in the middle of judging a plate of food on live television when her phone lit up with a video call.
Not a producer. Not an assistant. Her husband.
And for the next 4 minutes, a reality cooking competition on the other side of the world turned into something a lot more personal than anyone in that studio expected. The moment aired on the July 26th episode of MasterChef Australia, where Meghan appeared as a guest judge alongside a genuinely accomplished lineup: Chef Jean-Christophe Novelli, longtime MasterChef judge Po Ling Yao, and food writer Sophia Levin. The appearance had actually been filmed months earlier, back in April 2026, during Harry and Meghan's 4-day visit to Australia.
It wasn't a royal tour.
The couple stepped back from official royal duties years ago, and this trip was built around private business and philanthropic engagements instead. Their first time back in the country since 2018, when they'd visited as newlyweds on their very first joint royal tour together. MasterChef Australia had actually teased the cameo months in advance, posting a photo on Instagram back in April announcing that Meghan would be joining a star-studded lineup of guest judges, calling her arrival in the kitchen something viewers wouldn't want to miss. What nobody watching at home, or apparently in the studio itself, was fully prepared for was what happened partway through the judging. The contestants had just plated their dishes, and the judges were deep into tasting and discussing the food, when Meghan's phone started ringing with an incoming video call. She picked it up on camera, clearly delighted, and the room's whole energy shifted in seconds.
"Hi, my love.
My husband's here," she said, turning her phone so the other judges could see the screen, all of them waving and laughing as Harry's face appeared. Harry, for his part, played it completely straight-faced at first, deadpanning. "What's going on? Have I interrupted something important?" As if he genuinely wasn't sure what he'd walked into. Meghan filled him in with the kind of warmth that read as completely unscripted. "Well, we are actually in the middle of tasting all the dishes," she told him. "We have 4 incredible cooks here. It's amazing, they are so talented. We wish you were here." She mentioned that Harry was in Canberra at that exact moment, meeting with veterans as part of his own separate engagements on the trip, a small detail that quietly explained why the couple wasn't together for this particular day, even while traveling as a pair. Then she turned the conversation back to the food itself, teasing him a little.
"I wish you could try this.
These dishes are fantastic," she said, before zeroing in on one specific detail.
"There's a hot sauce that, well, you know me, it is so good. I think it might be too much for you."
"It's spicy." It's a small, throwaway line, but it's the kind of joke that only really lands between two people who actually know each other's tolerance for spicy food. Not a line written for an audience, just a couple teasing each other the way couples do. Harry took the joke in stride and wrapped the call with the same easy warmth he'd opened it with.
"Well, go and enjoy it," he told her. "I'm very sorry to disturb you. All is well here. I'll see you later."
And that was it. No drawn-out goodbye. No lingering for the cameras. Just a quick, genuine check-in between two people who happened to be on opposite sides of a country that day. The room reacted exactly the way you'd expect a room full of strangers to react to something like that unfolding in front of them. The judges and contestants broke into applause, and one contestant summed up the general mood in 3 words: "That's crazy." It's worth taking a moment to actually unpack what Canberra with the veterans meant, because it wasn't a vague aside. Harry's schedule that day was a fully separate, packed itinerary of its own. While Meghan was in the MasterChef kitchen, Harry was at the Australian War Memorial taking part in an Aboriginal smoking ceremony at the memorial's 4-hour country site, which specifically honors Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander service personnel. Dressed in a suit with his military medals, he laid a wreath, met Indigenous veterans directly, and listened to a welcome to country delivered by Ngunnawal and Gomero man Michael Bell. He also toured a gallery dedicated to Captain Reg Saunders, the first Indigenous Australian to be commissioned as an officer in the Australian Army, a piece of military history most visitors to the memorial would walk straight past. His day in the capital continued with a reception for Invictus Australia, the veterans sporting organisation he founded, and closed with a solemn last post ceremony before he flew back to rejoin Meghan in Melbourne. So the video call wasn't just a spontaneous thinking of you moment squeezed into a free afternoon. It landed in the middle of 2 entirely separate, formally structured days of engagements, on opposite sides of the trip, for 2 people who'd barely have crossed paths otherwise that day. The broader trip itself had been planned for close to a year, according to reporting at the time, and it deliberately didn't include the couple's children. Archie and Lilibet stayed home, in school, while their parents worked through a tightly packed 4-day schedule across Melbourne, Canberra, and Sydney. The visit opened at the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, a hospital Queen Elizabeth herself had opened back in 1963, before the couple split off for separate afternoon engagements, Meghan visiting a women's homeless and family violence shelter, Harry visiting the Australian National Veterans Art Museum. The next day brought Harry to Melbourne Bulldogs headquarters for a movable-linked event, focused on men's health, before he departed for his day in Canberra. They reunited later in the trip for the Scar Tree Walk, an Aboriginal walking tour through Melbourne, and a stop at Beta, a youth mental health engagement program. A spokesperson for the couple said there were deliberately no planned public meet-and-greet opportunities built into the schedule, explained at the time as a way to minimize disruption to members of the public and host organizations, though both Harry and Meghan did appear at a number of ticketed public events throughout the trip. This April visit carried extra weight simply because of how long it had been since the couple's last trip to the country. Harry and Meghan hadn't set foot in Australia since October 2018, when they toured the continent as newlyweds, married only months earlier, as part of a wider Pacific tour built around the Invictus Games being held that year in Sydney. That 2018 visit is remembered for another reason too. It was the trip where the couple first announced Meghan was pregnant with their son, Archie. Coming back to Australia in 2026, more than 7 years later, as private citizens rather than working royals, with 2 young children waiting for them back home, gave this visit a genuinely different character than the tour that came before it. It was also their second international trip of the year at that point, following a 2-day humanitarian visit to Jordan with the World Health Organization in late February, suggesting a deliberate return to a more active travel schedule after a quieter stretch. The MasterChef cameo itself fits into that same pattern of low-key, business and goodwill engagements rather than anything resembling official royal duty. It wasn't announced with a fanfare of a state visit, just a single Instagram post from the show months ahead of time, followed by months of silence until the episode itself finally aired in July. That gap between filming in April and broadcast in July is fairly standard for reality competition shows, which typically film well ahead of their air dates, but it meant the surprise video call moment sat quietly finished and unseen for months before audiences ever got to react to it. But there's something genuinely disarming about watching 2 people who've spent years being picked apart by tabloids, tracked by paparazzi, and scrutinized over every public gesture, just checking in on each other. No statement being made. No message being sent. Just banana pudding energy, 4 minutes long, unfolding on a cooking competition halfway around the world from where either of them grew up. What happened behind the scenes adds another layer to the story, and it comes from a source close to the show itself rather than official publicity. Alexandria Funnell, a former post-producer on MasterChef Australia, posted a video on TikTok ahead of the episode's release, sharing secondhand details after checking in with a friend still working on the production. According to what that friend told Funnell, and what Funnell then relayed publicly, Meghan was so great during her time on set, and really good at judging, a small but specific compliment, since guest judges on competitive cooking shows don't always land smoothly with contestants or crew. The account continued that Meghan was so nice to all the crew, had a good sense of humor and was just a normal human. One additional detail stood out in particular: her entourage on set reportedly consisted of just 2 people. For a working member of one of the most photographed families in the world, a 2-person support team on a television set is a notably small footprint, and it's worth being clear that this is all secondhand crew commentary shared publicly online, not an official studio statement, even if it lines up with a pretty consistent picture of how the appearance went. This isn't actually new territory for Meghan, either, even if the MasterChef cameo felt like a fresh moment to a lot of viewers. She's had a long-running relationship with food-focused television and content that predates her royal life entirely. Back in 2016, she appeared as a guest judge on an episode of Food Network's Chopped Jr., a much smaller, lower-key credit, but proof that this particular interest didn't start recently. More recently, she's built an entire Netflix series around it, with Love, Meghan, which put her cooking, entertaining, and lifestyle sensibilities front and center for a full season, giving audiences a much closer look at how she approaches food and hosting than any royal-era public appearance ever did. She's also been consistently active sharing food content on her own social media, outside of any formal television project. In 2025, she posted a video walking followers through a dessert she created and named after her daughter, Princess Lilibet, a dish she called Chantilly Lily, which she described as her own spin on my grandma's banana pudding recipe. It's a small, personal detail, but it fits the same pattern. Food, for Meghan, has consistently been a way of sharing something warm and specific about her own life, rather than just another item on a press schedule. It's also worth understanding what MasterChef Australia actually is, for anyone less familiar with the franchise, because it explains why a cameo like this carries real weight in Australian pop culture rather than being just another celebrity walk-on. The show has run for well over a decade as one of Australia's most consistently popular reality formats, built around home cooks, not professional chefs, competing through a season of increasingly difficult culinary challenges, judged by a rotating panel of food industry figures. Po Ling Yao, one of the judges seated alongside Meghan that day, is herself a MasterChef alumna, having finished as runner-up on the very first season back in 2009 before eventually becoming a judge on the show years later, giving her a level of credibility with longtime viewers that outside guest judges don't automatically get. Sophia Levin brought her own food writing background to the panel, while Jean-Christophe Novelli arrived with decades of professional fine dining experience. Meghan, stepping into that lineup for a single guest appearance, was joining a panel that Australian audiences already trusted, which likely explains why the crew's reported reaction, genuinely warm, genuinely impressed by how she handled the judging, mattered as much as it did. That context also makes the surprise video call land a little differently. It wasn't just a nice moment between two spouses. It happened within a franchise built almost entirely around unscripted, in-the-moment reactions, where contestants and judges' genuine emotional responses are the actual product being filmed. A husband calling in unannounced, and a room full of professional food judges and competing home cooks reacting with real surprise, fits naturally into a show that's always leaned on authenticity over polish. It's part of why the clip traveled as far as it did once clips started circulating. It looked and felt exactly like the kind of unscripted moment MasterChef built its reputation on, just with a genuinely famous couple standing in for the usual cast of home cooks and industry judges. A guest judging appearance. A phone call from a husband checking in during a work trip. A dessert named after a toddler. But stacked next to each other, they paint a picture of a couple who, years removed from the intensity of full-time royal life, seem to have settled into something that looks a lot like an ordinary marriage playing out in occasionally extraordinary settings. A cooking competition filmed on the other side of the world standing in for what, for most couples, might just be a lunchtime phone call to see how the day's going. That's really the heart of why this clip resonated the way it did once it aired. It wasn't built around controversy, and it didn't need to be. It was built around the small, familiar rhythm of two people who like each other, teasing one another about spicy food, checking in mid-workday, saying "I'll see you later" like it's the most normal sentence in the world, because for them, on that particular afternoon in Australia, it apparently was. Sometimes the biggest royal headline isn't a scandal or a statement. Sometimes it's just a husband calling his wife at work, and a room full of strangers getting to watch something that ordinary feel, for 4 minutes, genuinely sweet.